House of the Dragon episode 5. Best episode of the show yet. I'm currently reviewing 3 things: House of the Dragon, The Rings of Power and She-Hulk. And this is the best episode of House of the Dragon yet, and the best episode of anything so far that I've reviewed in my short time YouTubing. This video is probably going to be a 2-parter, but this time because it's too good. Not like episode 1 of Rings of Power, where it took me 3 videos to explain how bad it was. I'm not sure House of the Dragon can ever reach the highs that Game of Thrones did, but at this point, maybe it can. House of the Dragon is already better than I'd hoped going in. In short, I don't think it can reach the highs of Game of Thrones because of the prequel problem and the time skips. Being a prequel, you know whatever happens in House of the Dragon, it will end with the disappointment of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. And the time skips are a real issue. Here is the Princess Rhaenyra 3 years ago on the left, and how she is now on the right. That's how she's changed in 3 years. And here's Laena Velaryon and how she's changed in 3 years. 3 years ago on the left, and now on the right. Laena Velaryon was under the age of 14 in episode 2. The actress, Nova Fuilimose, is allegedly 12 years old. Episode 5 is set 2 or 3 years later, so the character is at best 16 or 17, and at worst maybe 14. In reality, the actress playing teenage Laena is allegedly 22 years old. So Laena seems to have aged 10 years in the space of 2, as the princess seems to have aged no years in the space of 2. It's frankly quite hard to sell a 22-year-old as being 14. House of the Dragon has all the hallmarks of Game of Thrones: lurid violence, a lot of political intrigue and sex scenes, including the nude scenes with Charlotte Hope, God bless her. Also nude Alfie Allen, if that's the sort of thing that interests you. Oh, is that what I have to do for subscribers? Take my shirt off and start an OnlyFans? Let me know below, good audience. Would I do better wearing a balaclava? Anyway, if Rings of Power was aiming to supplant this show and become the new Game of Thrones, it has failed badly. So, what has this show got that Rings of Power hasn't? For me, it's all down to the character building and writing. Sure, Game of Thrones grabs a lot of attention with the nudity and violence. Don't get me wrong, it is eye-catching. Lots of charming English girls with not many clothes on. I see no problem with this. But for me, this episode is the peak of House of the Dragon so far, and there wasn't really any sex in it. So, what I'm going to try and answer is why this is better than the Rings of Power, and why I don't think House of the Dragon can reach the highs that Game of Thrones did. So buckle up. We start off in the Vale. Daemon Targaryen's wife is out riding. It looks like she's been hunting and she has pheasant. And yeah, they did what I predicted in the last episode. They took a very pretty woman and tried to make her as dowdy as they could to fit the character. If you want someone who's not so conventionally pretty, you could just cast one. Not every woman looks like a model. And then they kill her off very fast anyway. I was quite curious about that character, and this is something that Thrones does well. It leaves the audience wanting more. Because I wanted more of this character. I wanted more of Rhea Royce. I wanted more of Khal Drogo. I wanted more of Oberyn Martell. In the Rings of Power, I don't want more of anyone. So Daemon's there to kill her. She stupidly doesn't ride away. This scene on the whole is a bit choppy, so much so that I'm not even 100% sure what happens. There are so many cuts, the horse bucks her off as Daemon reaches for it. She seems to fall and break her neck. Daemon then goes and picks up a rock to finish her off with, and it happens off camera. They instead cut to a shot of a fish getting its head cut off for some quite neat symbolism. But House of the Dragon, for pity's sake, stop doing all the important things off camera. This is, however, another thing that Thrones does that Rings of Power doesn't. The brutal surprise. Things like the Red Wedding. This death kind of came out of nowhere, and yet it was still logical. Did I want this killing to happen on camera? I don't know. It would have been brutal. It would have been very effective. Even more so if the character had got some more screen time up to now, so the audience cared more about her beforehand. Doing it off camera shows a real double standard, as a male character later in this same episode has his face smashed in and is beaten to death by a man's gauntleted hands, all on camera, with no cutaways. His face is hanging off by the end of it, in a scene graphic enough that I think just a still could get me a warning from YouTube. For some reason, violence directed against men is seen as more socially acceptable than violence directed against women, and this kind of epitomises that. Maybe because more perpetrators are men, and it's a guilt by association thing. But we saw it in the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. This is not even a thing restricted to fiction. The response to domestic abuse is very different depending on if the victim is a man or a woman. What follows this scene is for me the best single scene of the show so far. Otto Hightower is leaving after losing his role as Hand of the King, and Alison catches him as he's about to leave. She says she doesn't want him to go, and Emily Carey rarely sells it. He tells her it's kind of her fault. When he accused the princess of wanton behaviour, and Alison backed the princess, she undermined him. Alison says the princess swore her innocence to her, and that she believed her. She didn't foresee this happening. Her father says she should have foreseen it. She says that if you'd not been so relentless in advancing Aegon, her son, as heir to the throne, and her father has to tell her some hard truths, saying, "Listen, daughter, the king will die. In months or years, but he'll not live to be an old man. And if Rhaenyra succeeds him, war will follow. Do you understand? The realm will not accept her, and she'll have to put your children to the sword. She will have no choice. You know it. You're no fool, and yet you choose not to see it." I wish these two had had more time together on screen. I fear a time jump is coming soon, and Emily Carey will be replaced by Olivia Cook, and they've done it again. I want more. I want more of her version of this character. Later in the gardens, Alicent is approached by Larys, the son of Lord Strong, the new Hand. And it's another fantastic scene. Exactly what I said I wanted last episode. I said the series needed more manipulation, and here it is. He's thoroughly poisonous, and I like him already. He knows just what to say to try and manipulate Alicent, touching on the unfairness of the treatment of her father, telling her that he can be an ally to her, spilling information that the princess deceived her, spreading suspicion to advance his position. Another good scene, and I'm going to miss Emily Carey when she goes. I just hope Hollywood doesn't ruin her. Meanwhile, the king is on his way to Driftmark to try and marry his daughter to the son of the Valerians. They arrive, and what the hell happened to Laena? She's had quite the growth spurt. Also, the actor playing Laenor is massively out of his depth. He's only been in 2 things in his entire career. 1 episode of the Sean Bean series Time, and then this. And it shows. His acting is so flat. Frankly, the young man needs to be picked up and hurled bodily through the doors of RADA, and then have the doors nailed shut behind him. He just can't hang with the crowd he's in. There are actors in this show that have been working for a solid 30 years in acting. Emily Carey may only be 19, but she's been acting since 2012. She was acting in the British series Casualty for 7 years. She was in Wonder Woman and the remake of Tomb Raider, and they just throw this poor lad in Raw. Oh, she was such a cutie. Also, I hope you weren't hoping for a lot of sex in this episode, because the closest you're going to get is this gay kiss. Laenor is gay, by the way. Very, very gay. And his father seems to think he'll grow out of it with this marriage. Good luck with that. There does seem to be a lot of gay content in Thrones, and not many lesbians when it comes down to it. I just hope they don't feel left out. Maybe you should get on there, House of the Dragons. In Game of Thrones there were lesbian scenes in the source material, but they mostly got cut from the series. I find it strange that a series that stressed representation so hard seems to have missed a group of people out. There were notable lesbian scenes that I remember in the Game of Thrones books. One with Cersei Lannister and a noblewoman called Taena, and early on, Daenerys and one of her Dothraki handmaidens, Irri. Both scenes got cut from the series. So, dear viewer, you missed out on a scene of Cersei putting her fingers into, as George writes it, Taena's Meerish swamp. And I think that's a good place to leave it until part 2, because this video is about 10 minutes long already.